episode is brought to you by A3, a CMMC cloud-based collaborative environment for an organization seeking certification, otherwise known as an OSC, to build CMMC packages and share with a marketplace of consultant RPOs and assessor C3PAOs. Hi there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia. I will be your host, and our guest today is Tony Bunger. Hello, Tony. How are you?
Hey, doing pretty good. Hanging in there, waiting for the holidays.
Good. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Tony.
Yes, I'm retired Air Force, retired back in 2007, and been in cybersecurity ever since I retired. Been a consultant, been a CISO at academic universities, institutions, been a CISO at hospitals. Finally got back into consulting, and CMMC found itself to me. So I've been involved with CMMC since almost its inception, about 2 years ago now. So when I was at Auburn University, I helped them get ready for CMMC Level 3 at the time. And I moved to Redspin, which is the first authorized C3PAO, helped them with that. Now I'm at SecureStrux, helping them become an authorized C3PAO as well. Also doing some, as a provisional instructor, doing some training for the CCP course.
Good. So if you're a professional, a provisional assessor, then
yes, correct. Forgot to mention that, provisional assessor. Correct.
Yeah, what they're going to be looking for, right?
Right.
So that's very helpful for people to work with you then. All right. So today we are going to talk about an SSP. So our first question to kick it off is, what is an SSP?
Right. And it's not a very sexy subject, so we're going to do the best we can, system security plan. And because it's not, it tends to get overlooked. And with an SSP, it's very important. It's really what drives and defines your cybersecurity program, specifically particular systems, because and many times what I've seen in the past is it's overlooked, or if it's done at all, they regurgitate the requirement that's stated in the SSP. So basically, the SSP documents all your cybersecurity requirements for a particular system or an enclave, which can be considered a system. So basically, you go through, it's going to be based on some kind of cybersecurity framework, whether it's NIST SP 800-53, NIST SP 800-171, CMMC, right? Assessment guide for level 3 for CMMC model 1.0, or ISO 27000 series. So, it's going to be based on that. And what you do in the SSP is actually implement the status of those security requirements that come from those frameworks. And so that's really what an SSP does. It ensures that you are, tracks where the implementation status of your controls. Pretty much. It's very important. It is actually a security requirement as part of those frameworks. But really what happens, what I've seen in all my consulting days, is not enough attention is given to it.
Well, and I think it's a good thing to map it out, right? It helps you just map out exactly, what are you doing here? So by writing it down and talking about it, having meetings about it, so that way you have some kind of a manual that you can say, okay, here it is.
Exactly. And it's a living document. It never is what I'm showing my age, is what we call, you complete the document and you put it on the shelf and it collects dust, right? We call it shelfware. It's a living document. It needs to be open at all times for the stakeholders to review and update as things change. Threats change, the technology changes, your implementation changes. So it needs to be updated and accurate. So that's very important. What the SSP consists of is the definition of your system itself, who's responsible for the security controls, things like that. It's very important to have that SSP updated. Otherwise, you can't get to your destination.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And a lot of people, it's a check the box thing. Like, okay, good. Whew, it's done. Let's, exactly what you just said. Let's put it on the shelf and just, let it be. And we can't do that. Even with everything with IT, I think a lot of people have that outlook. Like, okay, we're going to check the box and then we're done. And
exactly.
A living document. I mean, if somebody gets fired or quits, or you have change in employment, then you need to update all that stuff. So that's something we need to make sure everybody remembers, that this is not a one and done. This is going to be a continual thing.
Exactly. And you don't want the corporate knowledge to walk off, which happens so often. often.
All right. So then who's responsible for developing and maintaining the SSP?
Yes, and this is another thing I run into is typically the SSP is thrown over to the closest IT guy. Okay, you're IT, you're going to do this. You're going to create the SSP because it says we need to have an SSP. It turns out that really the system owner is responsible for the SSP. So if you have system A, the owner of that system is responsible for upgrades, maintaining, developing, implementing that system, is responsible for that SSP. It doesn't mean that individual is an IT person. Typically it is, but also it doesn't mean that that's the only person responsible for that SSP. So if you look at the cybersecurity framework, just look at 800-53 alpha, there's all kinds of stakeholders in there. So if you're responsible for security control, for example, personnel security, well, that's not the IT guy. That's going to be someone in HR or the HR team that's going to be responsible for the personnel security domain within that SSP. So you don't have stakeholders, obviously, part of that. So the system owner is kind of the cat herder, going to go herd the cats to ensure that they're up maintaining their portion of the SSP.
And this kind of ties into our next question. So because different people are maybe taking responsibility for different parts of that, is there just one SSP or are there various SSPs within one organization?
Yes, and as the title states, System Security Plan is a security plan that documents the security requirements, information status of that system. Now, it can be tricky on how you define what's called an authorization boundary, which is a part of the system security plan. But typically it's by system, but also you have systems you rely on that's included in there. For example, you may have heard, I'm inheriting these controls from this cloud service provider. Well, you would just incorporate the cloud service provider's implementation status into the SSP, into that same SSP. Now, you have common controls, which is typically within your same organization. Using this as an example, well, maybe they provide multi-factor authentication for the entire organization, including multiple systems with respect to those systems having their own SSP. So those multiple SSPs for those separate systems would refer back to those common controls. We're all relying on for the multi-factor authentication solution, just as an example. So there could be multiple SSPs. I get this a lot. Could we put it all in the same SSP? You probably could, unless we go back to that authorization boundary, which I didn't define. The authorization boundary is pretty much based on who has control, operational control of that system, as well as the financial control of that system. So that's another reason why you may have separate SSPs. You get different bosses, correct, and maybe different policies that you are abiding by or implementing.
And just for CMMC purposes, do they have to have some kind of correlation where where they're associated with each other, or how does that work with CMMC?
Yeah, with CMMC specifically, for all you folks who've been working CMMC, we're going to talk that little word which starts with an S, scoping. And that's what's very important is the scoping. You need to clearly identify those boundaries where your CUI lives and breathes and dies, right? We call it, you transmit, you store, and you access CUI. You got to define that as what I call is a secure enclave, and that is the system. So you're developing your CMMC SSP based on that secure enclave. Now everything around it will be supporting that to protect CUI. So basically you would have that in your SSP as well. You're relying on some other entity to, for example, segment your network into that secure, sure you get that CUI data isolated. You also have security support services like, vulnerability management, your vulnerability scanning. If that could be within your organization, or it could be, cloud service provider or a managed service provider, providing that service, and that needs to be appropriately documented into your SSP. Did I answer your question on that one?
Yeah, no, you definitely did. And then this ties into our next question. So how is the SSP going to be used for an assessment, and do assessors use it? And this is where your expertise is going to help us with this answer.
Exactly. And I briefly mentioned, what's included in an SSP. And one of the first things an assessor looks at, whether they're assessing based on CMMC, based on HIPAA, compliance requirements, or anything else, whether it's just standard 800-53, they're going to look at the SSP first and try to understand the system. What does it look like? What does the organization look like? Who's responsible for what? What are the user access roles? Did you define those? And that's up front in the SSP. So you're going to have that system description. Here's what our system looks like. Here's how it operates. Here's our organization. Here's our key players. So, in the first 5 pages, you're going to understand the organization, the system, how it's employed, who supports it, who the privileged users are, non-privileged users are, right up front. So that needs to be done first for an assessor. As an assessor, that's what I look at before you even get into that section 2, which is the status of all the security controls, right? So basically, an assessor will look at that first. Then they will go down control by control, interviewing the stakeholders. Access control probably be your IT system administrators. Going back to personnel security, you're probably going to have some of the HR folks you're going to interview, and you're going to look at their view of whether the control is implemented or not. And I've seen this quite often where, and you've seen this too, Dana, it's where when you do a self-assessment, you tend to assess pretty liberally. It's like, yeah, we meet this control. Not quite. Yeah. And that's why you have independent assessors come in, right? To get that objective view on things. So that's what an assessor will do. They will use that as the guide throughout the entire assessment process. So assessors use it. Now, the authorizing officials, if we can go back into the DoD, RMF, or the NIST RMF, 800-37 concept, the authorized the AOs, authorizing officials, may use the SSP as well if there's an adjudication issue, or I've seen AOs actually want to see the SSP before they approve the ATO, the authorization to operate. So there are various users of an SSP.
KTL is a Microsoft Gold partner and a CMMC registered provider organization. Their professional team members represent a variety of backgrounds and industries that will map out and guide you on your road to CMMC compliance. The process starts with a dedicated team of CMMC registered practitioners who understand your specific requirements and are here to help every step of the way. KTL Solutions, delivering tailored solutions so you get the most out of your technology. Visit them today at ktlsolutions.com.
Well, I like that beginning section of the SSP, having everything kind of summarized, because that's going to help you go through the conversation with the assessor, I would assume.
Yes, exactly. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when I'm consulting and I'm talking with a company, and I ask them, what's your system look like? And I'm looking at their SSP, and they don't have any of that really in there. And when they explain it to me in English, I say, I wish we would have recorded that, because that's what you need to put in that first section, first part of the SSP. Just as you explained it in English, tell a story. This is our story. This is what our system looks like. This is the purpose of the system. This is why it's important. And this is why we need to protect it. And this is how we're protecting it. Ooh, we should have just written that down as, we should have had the recorder on.
That's not a bad idea. That's really is not a bad idea to have a conversation, either video record it or audio record it, and then go through step by step, because you're absolutely right. People have a much easier time just explaining something, having a conversation.
Exactly.
So that's great.
Exactly. And then they'll say, oh, I forgot what I said. And it's writer's block. We're all human, and that happens. You put pen to empty paper. It's like, I don't know how to put this down. Yeah. Well, you just explained it very well. We just should have recorded that and just transcribed that.
Yeah, I really like that. That's a good little tip for people. Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, here we go. What are the challenges with developing and maintaining an SSP?
Going back to many companies overlook it and as a checkbox. Okay, we'll give it to the IT guy or the security guy. They're smart folks. They can complete this, and they treat it as a flat, checklist approach without involving all the required stakeholders, and understanding there's processes involved as well. A lot of those, the risk management domain, personnel security domain, they're process-based. They're not technical solutions. You're not implementing technical solutions. You might implement an HR information system, but really it's all another challenge I see is when I do get a draft SSP from a company, it just regurgitates the security requirement. Like the first one, AC, first one is limit, the system to authorized users. And what is their response? We limit access to authorized users, and that's it. And they call it compliant or implement it.
Not how they're doing it.
Not how they're doing it, not justifying how they're doing it. And I've seen samples out there, and that's what happens is, and they think that's all you need to do, and it's not. So I just, so I need to, it's a little bit education where here's what you need to do. If your SSP, even for a small company, if your SSP is 100 pages or less, you probably haven't done it correctly. I'm saying probably. I've seen some just under 100 pages, but by the time you put the system description in there, as we talked about, the narration, that could be good 5 to 10 pages. Then if you have, 800-53, with all those controls, just do the math, 1 page per control, you got well over 100 controls. You got 110 controls and 171 if you do 1 page per control. So if you're not 100 pages or more, you probably are missing some things. And this is not an exercise in, thickness of the book. Okay, it's this thick, it's good, and it's better than the other companies that has a book this thick. So it's not that analogy there. So I know the ones that I've done in organizations, when I was in organizations, they've been well over 100 pages, and it's a useful document. Like I said, it's a living document, and the page count can go up, it can go down, depending upon how that architecture, that system changes.
And that was a really good point to say, okay, not only just this is what we do, we limit access. Okay. Explaining how you limit access. And when you're putting that together, you could think back to that recorded video of you explaining to somebody. If you were going to verbally explain to somebody, this
right, exactly.
Going back down, breaking it down step by step by step.
Exactly.
What do you do? And then how do you do it? So that's
exactly. And how do you do it? And the other thing that's missing a lot is the frequency of review. And what I do in the templates I provide, unfortunately, the CUI template that you can find online, to me, is not complete for each control. There's a table there, and for the CUI template that's online, free online, it only has the status of the control: implement it, not implement it, or not applicable. What I add to mine, it's very important, is who's responsible for that control. So I add a row in there, and this is not, this is, not me making this up. I've got it from somewhere else. I've been using this for many years. This model is who owns the control. So you're going to have, it's a common or inherited control, system specific control, or hybrid. System specific is the system itself is solely responsible for implementing and maintaining this control. Now the inherited, for example, well, we're going to inherit this solution, advanced email protection. We're going to use, a cloud service provider to do that. So you need to be very clear with the roles and responsibilities when it comes to implementing and maintaining that control. If that's missing, then it's very unclear, especially to an assessor. It's like, okay, you say you implemented multi-factor authentication, but who's doing that? And I'll say, well, we have a cloud service provider, company so-and-so, vendor so-and-so doing this. Well, how they implemented it. You haven't even mentioned them in your implementation status here. And the other one is I include frequency of review, and that is a security control and any framework that you look at, and you go to, for example, audit logs for each of those controls. You're going to audit logs. How often? Many times that's missed. We routinely. Well, what does routinely mean? So I have a checkbox in there, a drop-down box in mine that says it's annual, semi-annual, quarterly, weekly, daily, and you just click that. So we know that what is your continuous monitoring strategy for each control. So to me, that's a complete SSP. That's a complete review of each security control if you include those major elements.
Well, and also by having those included in there, when you get asked, the answers are going to be right there. How often are you doing this, and who or what is responsible for that? So that way, if they do ask, which they probably will, you don't have to go digging around anywhere else. It's boom, it's going to be right there.
Exactly. And there's horizontal components to this as well. Now, some of you folks, smart folks out there are thinking, well, that's in your procedures anyway. Well, true. Keep in mind that the SSP is not a procedural document. It's your planning document. It's what is your plan for implementing and maintaining those controls. Now, your procedures are going to be very specific. You're going to go in your procedures, and the procedure says, okay, I'm the system administrator, and I'm responsible for reviewing audit logs. And it says right here, I need to review them daily. Then I'm going to do that daily. Now, as an assessor, I'm going to look at in your SSP, you planned on reviewing those daily. I see that. Good. Then I go to procedures. Good. You've actually executed this per your SSP. So there's a lot of horizontal components, too many I can go into here in a short amount of time we have, but I can give plenty of examples how you can tell the entire story horizontally between your policies, your procedures, your SSP, and a responsibility traceability matrix, which I'm a big proponent of, is take that framework, put all the controls in a spreadsheet, and assign individuals to those. It goes a long way as well. It helps assessors as well. And I know in the CMMC world, that's a big thing, ensuring that roles and responsibilities are clearly identified and assigned to appropriate stakeholders.
And I would think if you can move horizontally through and everything is jiving, that you really have a good plan in place. And not only is it a plan in place, it's probably being utilized and executed, in a very good fashion. So
exactly.
Well, Tony, this is very, very helpful. Thank you.
I hope it was.
Yes. Is there anything else you want to throw out there before we go?
No, just for you folks out there who are maintaining SSPs, remember, don't put it on that digital shelf. Don't let it get lost deep in your hard drive somewhere, or hopefully a secure SharePoint site or something like that. Don't have it on you. I don't recommend having it on your personal hard drive or your corporate hard drive, but keep that SSP maintained, keep all the stakeholders involved. And that's a tough part. As I said, the system owner is also not only responsible for the maintenance of that SSP, but also as the cat herder. If it looks like that the personnel security domain is not getting the attention it needs, well, he needs to go find those cats and get them in there and start keeping it updated as appropriate.
Herd the cats and no dust. Those are our
yes, exactly. Yes.
Well, thank you very much for your time and expertise, Tony. This was really, really helpful for everybody. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. And we hope to see you on the next episode of 123 CMMC. Take care.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Dana.